welcome to yet another exciting episode of Skeptics and Seekers. I'm your host, David the Skeptic. My usual partner in crime is having a moment. I will not go into his personal business, but for those of you Christians out there who are prayer inclined, you might want to send out one of those generic prayers. God will know what you mean. Just send one out. He'll appreciate it. But I am joined by my good friend Andrew. Andrew, how you doing?
I'm doing great. Looking forward to this week's conversation.
Excellent. So just so you guys know, this was going to be a solo show all the way up until about 10 minutes ago when I called Andrew and said, hey, you want to do a show? And Andrew has no self-control. He said,
Yes, I should always turn those down. You know, it's a little bit like saying, hey, would you like to go out and drink too much and not be able to find your way home? I should always say no to that. I should
yeah,
always say no to, would you like to do a podcast in 10 minutes?
yeah. No, that's look, he barely knows what the topic is, and he certainly hasn't seen the 4,000 word blog that goes with this. I've only seen the 4,000 word blog once because I hastily wrote it this morning because I haven't had time to do it during the week. And so I will be kind of working off of those notes, which I haven't really organized for a good show. So, without a lot of preparation, still, I want to talk about this subject, though. And I thought I would bring on Andrew because he always has a slightly different perspective than I do on some of this stuff. And so I just want to get into it. We talked about slavery last week. It was a shit show. But, not that said, wasn't a bad show. It's just one that I would describe as a shit show. Highly emotional. We did a lot of. We were all rude. No one covered themselves in glory, and we're not sorry. So yeah, there are one or two of those planned out through the season too. So you'll see at least one more like that. I'm pretty sure.
Look, man, I've got one thought on last week's show, and that is only this. If you are the person in the position of affirming, I am here to defend slavery, go home.
Yeah. So much.
That's my
nicer.
comment on last week's
So
show.
much nicer than what I said. You know what? If you were actually on last week's show, I think you would have had something harsher to say. Yeah.
Look, it's not like we don't have an audience that probably overlaps people. It's not like they don't. Your listeners don't know me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Andrew can get a little. That's it.
I can be testy. Yes.
I think
It may happen this time around, by the way.
I think we're gonna be okay. I really do. But we might cover some of the ground that we covered last week, just in a maybe slightly more blood pressure friendly way. Today's topic. Actually, next week's topic, assuming that everything falls back in the schedule, it will be the high level show on politics that I promised for this week. That's still out there. It's still going to be good. This week, how atheists read the Bible and why it's pointless. Okay, so I just want to start right now. I'm an atheist. Andrew's an atheist, and we're particular kinds of atheists. We were Christians for a long time. In fact, I would say high-level Christians. For those who don't know, I was a preacher and held a number of positions in the church during my time. I only became a not Christian roughly 10 years ago, thereabouts. So Andrew spent a little bit less time than I did in the church, but he also went to seminary, and I didn't.
Yes, and if you are listening and you're a Christian as a result of my actions, and you somehow hear this show, I apologize to you, and I hope you find your way out.
Yeah, same here, actually. Yeah, we might actually do a show about that sometime. Um, but that's not this show. I um, I do want to acknowledge that there are other kinds of atheists, though, because not all atheists come from a long time in deep study, deep inside the upper echelons of Christianity. Okay, so there are those atheists who were just kind of casual Christians for a while and fell out of it. Right? They just woke up and kind of said, you know what, this doesn't really make any sense. Not going to do this anymore. And it's never that easy to get out. So I don't want to trivialize that. But they have a get out story that didn't involve a lifetime of being this deep into it. And then there are those atheists who were never Christians, but they were raised around a lot of Christian influences, and so they still had to kind of walk within the Christian world without ever having believed. And then there's the kind of atheist, I would say, like Darren Lute, one of the people who is on the show from time to time. Yes, I am certain that we will see Darren this season. We've got people like Darren who just have never given a damn. It's never been a part of their life. They don't get it. So there are different kinds of atheists. People come at this from different angles. But the thing that is interesting to me is all of the atheists, from my experience, all of the atheists that I know, that I've met online, that I've met in the real world, that I've had a chance to have conversations with the Bible with, we all tend to read the Bible the same way. So there's very little difference in how we read it. It doesn't matter whether you were kind of a scholarly academic type of Christian before you became an atheist, or whether you never, read the book except a handful of times on Christmas and Easter. We all tend to read it the same way once we become atheists. Um, Andrew, have you recognized that, or do you see a big variance in how atheists read the Bible? Because Christians, there's a wide variation on how Christians read it, but I,
No, I
I don't
don't.
see that kind of variation with atheists.
I don't either. I would say that. So we were talking about this in the run-up. I think, by and large, it was read largely literally. I think the problem comes in that we would all say, look, there are parts of the Bible that should be read figuratively in some way, or as myth, as legend, parables, etc. And while we would all have spent time largely reading the Bible literally, the disagreement would have come in that in those areas where we try to decide what parts should be read some other way. And that is the same problem I think that Christianity has across the board. Um, there doesn't seem to be any agreement about how to apply these rules. And I know we're going to get on to that later on in the show, so I'll leave it there. But yes, the atheist I know largely read the Bible the way I did, with the same kinds of rules, but the rules are not particularly consistently applied.
Okay, and just as a quick note for those of you who see my uh, eye scanning from left to right and up and down, kind of like a Borg implant. Uh,
Yes, David is a Cylon. That is true.
Borg, not Cylon, but yeah. So it's actually because I'm trying to read things as I talk, and so you don't see what I'm trying to read. Hopefully, you don't see what I'm trying to read. Um, there's a whole other world going on that the camera does not show, and it just shows me trying tracking with things and not really making eye contact with you, audience. So I'm sorry about that. I'm not good at eye contact anyway, so I kind of gave it up as a bad job a long time ago. Um, so yeah, that said, I would also add this before moving on. I think that Christians, by and large, read the Bible the way atheists do too. Um, eh, there's you start getting the variances as you get up in scholarship. So there's something to be said there. If you just talk to the average Christian on the street, they read the Bible largely the way the atheists read the Bible. If you just throw a verse out there and ask them, okay, so what does this mean? What do you see when you read this? They would interpret it mostly the way we do. And I think that there is a certain kind of Christian that starts to interpret things differently. And I see this happening in conversations all the time where we're talking about something and we bring up something in the Bible and they're in perfect agreement with you about what the Bible says until you close the trap and, and their eyes light up as they see what the problem with the Bible when it actually says the thing that it says, and then they start thinking, oh, wait a minute, well, it must not mean that. And then they try to find another way to interpret it. So Andrew brought up literal. I think this is important. We need to spend some time here. Andrew, I was a literalist. Okay, I wasn't a kind of a literalist. I was a biblical literalist. Verbal plenary inspiration. It's not just the word of God. These are the words of God. And when God said things, he meant them exactly the way he said them. He meant them literally. And yes, I, like every Christian, would acknowledge that the Bible is a mix of genres. There is poetry, for instance, in the Bible. But the mix of genres didn't stop it from being read literally. So even if you say that there's some allegory in the Bible. Now, I was one of those Christians who would have never acknowledged allegory in the Bible either. I would not have said that there is any allegory, any mythic elements whatsoever. Um, but even if you acknowledge Christians that acknowledge that there's some allegory in there, they still read the allegory as if it's literal history. Um, and even when you say there's some poetry in the Bible, that poetry is still often read as if it's literal, if not history, literal science. It's saying true things about the way the world is. Let me just give one example of reading poetry that way. When David says that I was a sinner even before I was born, uh, Christians read that as a passage that promotes a pro-life agenda. Well, why? Because we were alive, even in the womb, even before we were born, before we were conceived, we were alive, and
Yeah,
we get that
I'm
from.
sorry. I've got to say something here.
Okay.
If we were alive before we were born, abortion can't possibly mean anything.
Well, so abortion doesn't mean anything. So I will just agree with that, and we will tangle with you in the comments. Um, it is a silly idea though, but it's used in abortion in anti-abortion polemic with Christians all the time. And also the Calvinistic notion that we're born sinners, also a Catholic notion, that we are born sinners. Where do we get that from? Well, a lot of people cite that particular piece of poetry. Uh, so they will acknowledge that it's poetry, but they still treat it as if it's literal. And so everything in the Bible gets that literal gloss. Had a conversation with Dale a couple of weeks ago. I think I may have lost you there, Andrew. We'll pick you back up in a moment. We had a conversation with Dale, and Dale gave us mytho-history. Mytho-history. And he was very careful to say, even though there are mythic elements involved here, that it's still history. Still history.
I have no idea what that means.
That's okay. Don't worry about it. We're still going as if that didn't happen. I'm not editing. Don't bother with it. So I was just mentioning that Dale brought up mytho-history a couple 3 weeks ago because
No, that's what I mean. I
right.
wasn't lost. I was just on mute.
Oh,
I have
okay.
no idea what it means to call something myth and also call it historical.
Yeah, no, I was very confused by that. And Dale, maybe you can come in, into the comments and talk about that a little bit more. But I think psychologically, it's really just that desire, that need to frame the Bible as saying literal things that happen in the real world, and it's telling actual truth that you should believe. And the moment they start saying that, well, it's mythology, that brings up the idea of fiction, and they want to run as far away as they can from the possibility that there's something in the Bible that's fiction. And so that's the thing. So even when they're talking about these quote unquote other genres, they still talk about it in literal terms. And so we can't really be blamed for reading the Bible literally. That's how Christians insist that we look at it. And look at the Gospels. Look at Acts. All of that. There are lots of things uh, within those texts that seems like they should be read as legend. Um, but no, the Christian insists it's all literal. Talking snakes, talking donkeys, literal. Um, and so, yeah, are we bringing some kind of bias or wrong-headed thinking to the table when we look at the Bible and see it as literal? I don't think so, but I think this is part of why we do it. Christians have trained us to read the Bible this way. Andrew, okay, Andrew, maybe not. I think you're mute because yeah, okay. Well, when
I'm
you
here. Can you
okay,
hear me?
yeah, I can hear you.
Okay, I was on mute.
You don't
So
actually have to mute yourself. I don't care if the audio is that clean today. Don't worry about it.
okay, all right. So
Yeah.
here it occurs to me that no matter how liberal you want to read the Old Testament and the New Testament, or maybe you just want to read the New Testament, and, get rid of that other 2/3 of the Bible that doesn't mean anything. But no matter how liberal you want to be with your reading, at some point, somewhere in that reading, if you are actually saying to other people that the Bible is a guide for life in human existence, that there's some set of ethics and ontology that are going to some ontology and epistemology we should derive from our reading. No matter how liberal you are, you have to apply some literal reading somewhere. And I think in the case of the Bible, I decided it was a bad job, and we'll get into why maybe in a few minutes.
Yes.
But I see no way that there can be a God fingerprint on that book, and
Yes.
so we'll get into that in a minute, I think. But uh, there's got to be something literal if you want to hand me the book and say that there's an example there that I should follow.
Right. So I didn't put this in the blog post, but I have said this often. No matter how liberal you are, at bottom, you're reading the Bible literally somewhere. So something has to be literal in it, or else you're not going to be a Christian, right? So you've got to believe that something actually happened. Um, and so really it just becomes an exercise in where you plant that literal flag. Uh,
Right,
so I think
right.
that for the non-Christian, it just makes more sense to read it all as literally as possible until it doesn't make sense. When Jesus says, "I am a door," we don't think of Jesus as an actual door. Christians like to bring up this example. Nobody makes this mistake. This mistake is made by zero people in the world. Right. So if you can read, you understand that this is a metaphor. Even if you don't know the word metaphor, you know that this is a metaphor. Um, but when you see uh, the Bible giving a narrative of Jesus being born of a woman who has never had sex. Uh, how are we supposed to read that? Well, the authors seem to be saying it as if it was a thing that really happened. And so that's how we read it. And yet, some
Sure.
academic Christians are willing to throw that one out and say, no, that's not necessarily literal. So, at some point, even Christians have to plant their literal flag somewhere. But for the skeptic, it just makes sense to start off reading it literally until you can't. Until it
Right.
doesn't make sense.
Right. Did the sea get parted for Moses? Was there an angel of death that killed firstborn children? Uh, this is this is this is the mistake that people do make, and somebody's sitting out there saying, "Okay, but I'm not the one making the mistake." Maybe you're not, but we haven't reached agreement on who is right and who is wrong. And by the way, that's not the atheist's job. So if you want atheists to believe these stories, um, there needs to be another Nicene Council, guys. You need to, you Christians, you need to get together and figure this stuff out.
Right. And so
Because
that's, if I can, you just said some key words there. Believe the story. The Christian might want to try, yeah, but you shouldn't read literally things that wouldn't make sense. If they were read literally, and that's just not a criteria we could go with, because all of it is crazy. None of it makes sense. So why shouldn't we read it as a literal 6-day creation when you've got a talking snake in the story? If we're supposed to believe the talking snake, then I guess you believe anything, right? I mean, what part are we supposed to believe? Are we supposed to believe the talking donkey? If we can believe the talking donkey, then none of it makes sense. We just as well read it all literally. Are we supposed to believe that the sun stood still so that Joshua can kill some more enemies? If we're supposed to believe that, you can't tell us only believe the stuff that would make sense. None of it makes sense. So yes, we read it all
and
literally. We
I
have
have less
no way to
problems,
distinguish.
right? And I have less problems with a talking snake than I do with a magic fruit that somehow tells you something about good and evil.
Right.
so, I,
So,
so look, the story makes me laugh, and if you're not laughing, uh, that's a warning sign.
right.
you're taking this stuff way too seriously. If you're not laughing about a fruit that you can eat, that helps you decide that there's evil
Right.
or,
We
or good
we
or
we
whatever.
atheists would just say, I think most of us would say, interested in the comments here, that none of it makes sense. But if you're asking us to read it, if the authors are saying, no, 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 this may not make sense to you, but it really happened. And if you want us to accept one of those things, we just don't have the tools to go through and say, well, okay, that makes sense in this worldview, but that doesn't make sense in this worldview. It's like trying to watch a cartoon and saying, well, when the Roadrunner runs off the cliff and he's pumping his feet, that breaks physics. That doesn't make sense. Um, and you say, well, why the heck would I care about physics when all of these animals are talking? you
Right.
know? What are you
you
talking
you
about? It stopped
you
making sense at the opening credits.
you've got this god walking around in the tops of the trees. Physics just doesn't apply. Look, and not too long after that, you've got a dude walking on water,
Sure.
right? Yeah,
So yeah,
the
don't
story
tell
is
us
out.
not to read it literally because that would make hash of the. No, it's all hash. So when we read it
Right,
literally, we're really just trying to read it A, the way it seems to want to be read, and B, the way Christians have insisted that we read it, except for the parts that would be embarrassing if read literally. Let me
Right.
move on. I don't want to stay too long here because I got a lot of more fun stuff to go do than this. But
Sure.
I'm just trying to reasonably help the Christian understand why we read it this way. Um, we're not trying to um, be dishonest in the reading. Um, Also, there's the idea of legislation. All right, so this is not just the word of God, but the law of God. So the Bible is often
Yeah.
spoken of as the law, and the Old Testament in particular as the law. In the first five books, in particular, the law of Moses. The Pentateuch is the law. If we say the books of the law, we're talking about Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy. These are books of the law, and then the next 12 books are the books of history. So you just think about that. The first 17 books of the Bible are listed as law and history. How do you read law and history? You read it literally, as straightforward as possible.
Right. So there's something really important buried in there. No matter how you think humans got here, whether you're an evolutionist or a young Earth creationist, no matter what the mechanism is, if you're a Christian, you think God created the universe. And at some point, he he spoke it into existence, or he waved his magic wand, or he spilled a potion, or whatever he did, and out popped the universe.
Please don't ever say spilled a potion again.
Look, it's not my fault, man. These are the things that come to mind. But here's why that's important. If you think that God can wave a magic wand or speak the universe into existence, however you think he did it, is there any story that has to be figurative? Is there any account of his action that you could say definitely can't be historical? This is the creator and framer of the universe. And in some sense, the reason there are literalists is because they are simply acknowledging that being that they believe in is the being that can create something from nothing. And with that in mind, there should be nothing out of his capability.
Right, and this is one of those places where I have to just agree with Ken Ham. Um, why on earth would you get squeamish about a literal 6 day creation when you read the rest of the Bible and you see what this God is capable of? He's capable of anything. He's capable of making the world in 6 days and making it look like it was old, just to be a test to later generations,
Sure.
as the Catholic Church used to teach. It's not outlandish, and so yeah, there's nothing, there's no cue in the Scripture that would tell a non-Christian, okay, you should stop reading literally here, and then you should start reading literally there.
Right.
Uh,
That's
so
exactly.
a word on translations. So there's a there's a problem with the Bible. Um, it's written in pretty much dead languages, and so just to translate those languages to the live version of those languages is a major effort. Today's Jew probably doesn't speak the same way as as Moses,
Mm.
assuming that there was a Moses. So you've got you've got a problem with translation there, but there's always a problem with translation. Um, you and I, Andrew, have a problem with translation. When you say something This happens in our conversations all the time when we're not recording them. When you say something, oftentimes, if it's something worth thinking about, I will take a moment and I will think about it and I will repeat what you said, but not in the exact words. I will say what I think I heard you saying in my words.
Sure, we
And
paraphrase each other for additional clarity.
right, and oftentimes I get it wrong. And we speak the same language. we, we went to the same schools. And yet I get it wrong. We grew up in the same region of the country. Um, and I sometimes mistranslate you, and you sometimes mistranslate me.
Sure.
These are two people who know each other very well, have spent 10,000 hours talking to each other. We have practice of understanding what the other means, and we still have translation errors. How
Yeah,
much more magnified are the translation error possibilities in the Bible?
so I want to talk about that for a second. That one, so, back in the Bible classes that I took in the late 80s and early 90s, we used to talk about these dead languages as if they were a feature and not a bug. And the story went something like this. We have these dead languages, and we're glad they're dead because it somehow cemented the ideas in history, right? Those languages aren't moving anymore. And so, if we can accurately translate them, then we will have a sort of cast in stone idea of, of what those people thought, how they approached the world. But more importantly, we have an accurate picture of that God because after all, the Bible was verbal plenary, verbally and plenarily inspired, right? And so the languages are dead, and that is a feature and not a bug, because we get an accurate representation of God.
Exactly. There's no language drift in a dead language.
Right. But now here's the problem, and later on I came to recognize that it is a bug and not a feature. And here's why it's a bug. When you dead end a language, you dead end its ability to keep up with culture later.
Right.
So we used to have this idea that we couldn't encounter a problem that wasn't spoken to by some passage in the Bible. You've got some life problem, no matter what it is. If you look deeply enough, if you look hard enough, if you are familiar enough with these books in the Old Testament and the New Testament, you can find a message that speaks to the problem that you're having. But I no longer think that that is the case because those people don't keep up with future history. They did die. Their language did end. And those languages don't have the capacity to represent all of the problems that we have today. And so I'm no longer convinced that that is a feature and not a bug. And that's just another reason that I don't take the Bible very seriously.
Right. So, I see the problem with translation when I watch a foreign film. By the way, I'm not reading the subtitles. I can't do that. Um, every now and then, if I'm close enough to the TV, very, very lucky, I can read some of the subtitles. The way I watch a foreign film is I have an overpriced Apple TV that happens to have excellent accessibility. This is not an Apple TV commercial. But one of the things that that it has, and what a lot of companies have as an extra track, is audio description. And when you have audio description turned on, it describes the scene and what's happening and things like that, and it reads the subtitles aloud. So I don't have to miss the subtitles, and I can watch foreign films and things like that that have audio descriptions. I only bring that up to say this: anyone who watches foreign film uh, uh, or hears audio descriptions, or there are these films that were obviously originally done in a different language. A lot of Netflix shows, they were obviously done in Japanese. They were done in German. I'll watch these shows too, but they have English dubs, uh, and those are always fun because it you can understand the words, you can understand what they're saying, but there's always a moment where you're thinking, no, that's not how we would say that. That's I think I know what you mean, but that's really not how that that would be said if you were speaking English. And so you're always doing this job of translating and interpreting after it's been translated. Because it's not perfect. Language is not very portable. It doesn't move freely from one tongue to another tongue. There are things that you have to do to massage it to make it fit into another language. So I say all that to say that translations, it's a very human process. It's a
Sure.
it's a very
Just
intensive process, and it's a very inaccurate process. Even the best translations are full of inaccuracies, and these are the translations that we can see.
yes, yes. So some languages, just one of the myriad problems is English is an SVO language, subject, verb, object. That's the way we organize our teaching of English, right? We teach children about the subject, followed by the verb, followed by some object, right? And English is somewhat unusual in that regard. So verb, subject, object languages, VSO, is another way to organize language. And English speakers quite often have trouble making the switch from an SVO language to a VSO language or some other organization, just because rethinking where we put verbs and subjects and objects is a tricky process. And that's just one of a whole cascade of issues that go along with moving from one language to another. But you sort of spoke of that when you were talking about listening to movies that are dubbed, right? And
Hmm.
we hear this sort of problem moving from our thoughts as SVO speakers to a language that is sort of literally interpreted and the sentence organization.
Yeah. So as a English speakificationist, um, as one of those, uh, yeah, it's a very confusing language even to those of us who speak it natively. But just to give a trivial example of the subject verb object um, problem, let's say we construct a sentence: Jill struck Jack in the head. Well, one is a subject, one's an object. And if someone is not used to our sentence structure, they could easily say or hear Jack struck Jill in the head. And that might make perfect sense to them because maybe they're used to objects before subjects, kind of thing. So look, this is I don't want to get too deep in language. Language is interesting, and textual criticism is a deep hole where there are no solutions, and people do not agree. It is a constant bar fight um, when you're talking about textual criticism. But it's interesting here because last week much of the argument was
And
mired in
and I think here I'll
translation.
just go ahead and say um, that another reason I don't take the Bible very seriously is there's an idea that these ancient listeners to God uh, got messages and recorded messages in these dead languages, but these messages were actually from God. They were being told things that we couldn't think.
Yes, that was that was most unfortunate, uh, but we're back.
Okay, so I'll
Looks
just
like the recording mechanism is doing its thing, so we're just going to motor through, folks.
okay. I'll pick right back up there. So these people who were recording their thoughts in dead languages were in these dead languages were hearing from God. And not only are they hearing from God, but they're hearing messages from God that humans on their own could otherwise not think. One of the popular examples of this that you'll hear Christians bring up pretty often is the golden rule. Jesus gives us this golden rule, and humans couldn't have come up with it on their own, right? And so to go along with this sort of translation issue, I'll simply say that I don't see any reason to think that if humans couldn't think of it on their own, God could relay it and it make any sense. So here's my point. If someone a lot smarter than me comes around and explains some intricate detail of the universe, and because I'm at the level I'm at and they're at the level they're at, I am not capable of understanding them, then it's a lost cause. And so anything that is recorded in the Bible is to me necessarily a thought that humans could think on their own without any need for supernatural intervention.
Right. I don't understand the concept of being given thoughts that humans could not otherwise come up with on their own, and yet being able to write that down
Right. And
somehow.
other people make sense of it later on.
Right. And furthermore, you're writing it down in your own words because Christians insist that the Bible is not dictated. And so
Right,
you
except for
have to
those that do
understand it.
insist that it was dictated.
Right. um,
My fault they
so
exist.
so last week, the conversation got mired down in translation a lot. You know, this word Eved, whatever the word was, well, it was, you know, badly translated. Who badly translated the word? Was it atheists? You know, I didn't translate the word. I have not written a translation yet. Um, I might one day, just as an
I
exercise.
want, oh, yes, the atheist translation committee,
Yeah,
we should.
yeah, but it would be a non-academic translation. It would be the atheist translation based on the other translations, based on the culture. This is what it seems like it says, translation. Um, yeah, so we got kind of mired down in this translation thing, but the problem with that argument to me, at least as it was applied last week, is that almost every scholar is wrong. There are some that translated the word differently in other, you know, in some places, you know, and you know there was some variance there, but most of the time, um, the word was translated slave in places where it made sense that it would be translated like that. Um, and there's not one translation that's not guilty of that, and so you know I think that some place in the shouting I'd ask, well, what translation do you want me to use? Name the translation. I love translation arguments because it just shows part of the mess of the Bible. If you're telling me that the Bible that I'm reading now is bad because the translation is bad, great, I'll throw it away. What other Bible do you want me to pick up? Because I can show you where there are translations with that too, problems with that too. Great, I'll throw it away. We'll just keep doing that until we've thrown them all away. Otherwise, tell me what translation I can safely pick up and read, and we not get mired down in some translation argument.
So that's exactly right. So if I recall, I think there was a big kerfuffle about the translation of the word slave. If I remember, I think that's what the big argument was. So it occurs to me, because I know a little bit about the 1970s and 80s and earlier, and translation wars. You know, so it was a real problem. So you have the King James, just as a for instance, the authorized version, and it's a very literal word for word attempt to move from Greek to English or Hebrew to English, whatever, whichever language you can find the most reliable manuscripts.
By the way, folks, I have in the blog some conversation about word for word versus thought for thought um, translations. I'm not going to talk about that here. It's kind of boring, but it's interesting in print. So read it. And I go into transliteration as well. Also, not going to talk about that here. It was very interesting. I linked to some articles. So read the blog or the blog, skepticsandseekers.squarespace.com. That's www.skepticsandseekers.squarespace.com. Read the blog, sign and discuss, leave a comment. Love to hear from you. You were saying, Andrew. I had to stop for a commercial break. By the way, commercial break. You guys, you see me keep picking up this Diet Coke here. So this week we are sponsored by Eddie Murphy's brand Diet Coke. Have a Coke and a smile and shut the fuck up. All right. That's the end of the commercial. There are some people who will get that.
So there are translations like the King James. I think the English Standard Version may be the most recent attempt at this. That are sort of word for word translations. But during the translation wars, we did have dynamic equivalents or sort of thought for thought. There's some other translation schemes, but for purpose of this conversation, it's useful just to point out that there are at least two. Right, word for word translation and thought for thought translation is close enough to be accurate. And the problem is that whether you're talking about the NIV or the King James, or the New King James, and the English Standard Version, the Revised Standard Version, the New Revised Standard Version, the American Standard Version of 1901, look, we can go on all day, no matter what the scheme is. And no matter what the version is, they all say slave.
Yeah. Yeah. So, okay. Right. So all the translators are idiots.
Last week. Yeah. I wasn't there last week. You've now gotten my speech on how it could be that they all got it wrong. It doesn't seem that there's agreement that they got it wrong.
Right. And by the way, this is not an argument that they didn't all get it wrong. So let me just put that out for those philosophically inclined. Not at all making an argument that they didn't all get it wrong. But if they did all get it wrong, just another reason to throw away the Bible. It's pointless. What are you doing?
Look, that's exactly right. I'm not saying. Well, so I will go so far as to say that I think they did get it right. I don't care whether they did or didn't. But if we are going to take scholarship seriously, well, then the professionals, the experts, seem to largely agree here. Now, I'm not making the argument that they're right. I am making the argument that if they're wrong, we don't seem to have a clear way to get to what is right. And that should concern everyone.
So let's talk about what's right. So let's round this thing into some fun stuff at this point. Let's have a little fun, and then we'll go eat lunch in our separate corners. So all of this really is just a kind of a preamble to help explain how it is we read the Bible the way we do. And I hope that Christians take this to heart. And if some atheists have some different opinions and say, no, that's not how I see it, raise your hand in the comments. I want to see what you have to say about that. But I just wanted to take a few minutes to illustrate how we read the Bible. So after that, let's just look at a few things. And I'm not going to pull up anything that's not uncommon to everybody. So at risk of repeating myself, I want to I just want to show how these things are applied. So the attributes of God. I just wanted to start there. Uh, God is omni everything. He's omni. Um, so what are the main omnis? Omnipotent, omniscient, omnipresent, omnibenevolent. Am I missing any?
No, so the big three are all powerful, all present, and all knowing.
Okay. Well, I sometimes hear all loving thrown in there, and I always, yeah. Well, that's my reaction to it too. But I mean, I'm not making this stuff up, so
Oh,
uh,
look, I just have to ask: would you kill your child for God?
it's in the notes.
Okay, sorry.
We'll we'll get there, and if we're lucky, we'll run out of time before we do. Um, so, uh,
But the bigger question is not would you kill your child for God. The bigger question is, would God ask you to kill your child for Him?
it's also in the notes.
Okay, I don't. So just so they know, we didn't share notes up front.
No, I
Um,
don't. I don't give you my notes. Screw that.
and I don't particularly care about the Abraham test because God disqualified Himself as a humane, benevolent, all loving God right then. We did.
Also in the
Yeah.
notes.
Uh,
Um, okay,
uh,
let's talk about the
okay.
attributes of God.
Why do atheists read the Bible and why does it not matter?
Let's talk about God's attributes for a moment. God is all powerful, right? So that's what Christians tell us. That's what they want us to think. So I got it. I'll take Christians at their word. I used to say that too. God is all powerful. Sure. Um, except when you read the Bible, then he starts to look a little bit less powerful in places. Right. So I'm not saying that it happens all the time, but there are places um, where he looks less powerful. I want to just start right in the Garden of Eden, which really is my favorite story in the Bible. I've written half a book on it that I'll never finish, never get published. But I do like the story a lot for a number of reasons. But in that story, you have I'm not going to say Satan, but you have maybe a Satan inspired creature uh, in the garden right there with the man and the woman. And the idea that one gets when reading the story is that life for them and life on the planet would have been perfect, ideal, if not for that one pesky creature getting in there. Because maybe they would have stayed on the straight and narrow had they not been tempted. And one would think that. Otherwise, why have a tempter there? Why not have the story clean? It just let them make a bad decision on their own instead of being influenced by something. But at any rate, you've got this serpent in there, and you are left with one or two conclusions. And I don't see how you get a third conclusion out of this. Either God wanted that creature there uh, to do exactly what he did, which is to tempt the new humans, or he didn't, and the creature just got in there anyway, and God threw up his hands. Now, look, I can have fun with the story either way, but I just wanted to bring up this passage uh, from Matthew. Didn't write down the reference, don't care. I think it's Matthew 13. Jesus told them another parable. The kingdom of heaven is like a man who sowed good seed in his field. But while everyone was sleeping, his enemy came in and sowed seeds among the wheat and went away. When the wheat sprouted, and formed heads, then the weeds also appeared. The owner's servants came to him and said, "Sir, didn't you sow good seed in the field? Where then did the weeds come from?" So this is what the master says. "An enemy did this," he replied. The servants asked him, "Well, do you want us to go and pull them up?" Speaking of the weeds here. "No," he answered, "because while you are pulling the weeds, you may uproot the wheat with them. Let both grow together until the harvest. At that time, I will tell the harvesters, first collect the weeds and tie them in bundles to be burned. Then gather the wheat and bring into the barn." Now, this parable. This is obviously talking about. Well, I say obviously, nothing's obvious. The Bible seems to be talking about the condition of the world. You have the good and the evil thrown together, and it's not the time to separate them. But in the end times, the evil ones will be plucked out and burned, and then the good ones will be left. The thing about this story, though, that strikes me is that in this story, the master of the field is useless. He is utterly useless. He There's no security for the field. The evil one can just walk in, got in there. Don't know how he got in there. Not a good fence. He has time to sow weeds among the wheat. All of the workers are asleep. No one standing guard. And then when he does his work and the workers want to try to stamp it out as quickly as possible, nope. Master throws up his hands again. Nothing we can do about it. Just going to have to wait until this all matures. I can't help but hear the creation story, the Garden of Eden story, whenever I see this passage. Andrew?
Yeah, look, I completely agree. And yet the thing that bothers me about this story is not that I don't hear the Garden of Eden story. I do. The thing that bothers me about this story is how Christians use it. So there's this binary eternal decision, right? Either you're the wheat or you're the chaff, and if you're the wheat, you get collected, and of course, ultimately, this is a nod to heaven. And the chaff, by the way, the stuff that's collected in bundles, gets burned up, right? So there's hell. Here's my problem. It's more binary thinking that is not uniquely Christian, but it is sort of wrong thinking. So gardens and fields don't only have wheat and weeds. We plant all kinds of things. The American Indians used to have something they called three sister farming, and they'd actually plant crops that were of various heights, and so they could make more use out of a plot of land. My only point is this: I see absolutely no reason that the master of the universe, the creator and framer of all that we survey, should be limited to two outcomes. And I know that we can pick these stories like this particular parable, and that's fine. But I don't see why the master of the universe should think in such limited terms.
Right. Well, once again, he seems to have a shortage of power. Calvinists would say no. No, God does not have a shortage of power. Everything unfolded exactly the way he wanted it to unfold. The progressives would say, "Oh yes, actually, God does have a shortage of power. You're not doing him service by saying that he can do anything." And the main line are usually in the all-powerful camp, and when things like this are pointed out, they just mutter something incoherent and then go eat their sandwich. So I think that there are definitely places where God seems to have a shortage of power. There was that time when no, that's not it. Yeah, no, that's it. I don't see the scripture reference, but you remember that one place where uh, God's people couldn't win because the enemies had iron chariots.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
They're they were from the Iron Age. God's people were from the Stone Age. I'm not sure, but they this iron, this was new technology. They didn't know quite what to make of that. Um, so, by the way, Andrew, you might get a kick out of this. As I'm looking for the reference, I'm skimming through an article from Apologetics Press.
Oh, shoot me. So while you're
Tip
looking
me.
for that, I'll just tell another story that I find incoherent out of the Old Testament. By the way, there's a lot of them, but this is one of my favorites. Moses is standing on a hill, and the children of Israel are so the children of Israel are fighting against some foreign foe, one of the Hites, if I recall, Amorites, the Hittites, the Jebusites, whatever. They're in this big battle. And the only way for them to win is for Moses to hold his arms up.
Oh
And and every time he gets tired, he starts to folks, this is not my problem. It's not my fault. I'm aware of it. I'm not responsible for it. Every time he lowers his arms and starts to flag, he gets tired. The tide of battle
yeah, right.
starts to turn.
Literally, when his arms start sagging, people on their side die.
Right.
What a how sadistic is that, guys? Just try holding your arms out. Hold them out for as long as you can, and keep them from not sagging. Now try this for the hours it would have taken for this battle. Just
And then the story goes, like I said,
well, hang
I'm
on.
aware of
Every
not
time
responsible for
your
it.
arms start sagging, a family member dies.
Right.
Just
And so I'm not sure whether the children of Israel sort of outsmart God here or not, because a couple of Moses's lieutenants come around and they hold his arms up,
yes.
hold his arms up for him. Now I'm just going to tell you this: if I'd been an Israelite at the time, had I been a Jew, I will just tell you, you'd have never needed an Ark of the Covenant further on in history, because I'd have tied Moses up where he could never lower his arms again.
Well, look,
Sorry, Moses. We will,
what what
we
happened to
will.
those? What happened when those lieutenants also got tired?
I mean, so
How deep does this go? Where people have to stack on top of people to keep these arms up?
look, you want real type anti-type relationship? Right there is where I'd have nailed Moses to a cross. He wouldn't have been lowering his arms. There'd have been no more arm lowering, sir.
Well,
No
look,
more arm lowering.
it's mytho history. Okay, don't worry about it.
But so I know that wasn't the story you were looking for, but
no. That's also one of my favorites, though, and it definitely kind of fits into the idea. I was looking for Judges 1:19. So the Lord was with Judah, and they drove out the mountaineers, but they could not drive out the inhabitants of the lowlands because, wait for it, they had chariots of iron. Look, guys who are forming your posts right now to explain to me why exactly that does not mean what it looks like it says it means. I am aware that there are any number of ways to read this. All right, I get it, but honestly, you have to ask yourself as you were drawing up this 1,500 word post, Mac Attack. Um, yeah, I called you out, buddy. Actually, Mac Attack wrote a fairly good response to the slavery post. So those of you who haven't gone back to that in a while, just go back and look at that. I'm gonna get to you. I'm gonna get to you at some point. All right. Um, So yeah, before you write this post out, you need to ask yourself: is this the kind of logic or thinking that the man on the street would have when they read this? The answer is it is not. All right, I've seen these posts,
Well,
and
but I think you've answered the age-old question, though. We now know why God needs a starship, because those other damn people have chariots of iron. Oh, okay, sorry.
Star Trek Five, the only good thing that came out of that
Unreasonably
movie.
dragging Star Trek in, but I'm actually asking the question: how is it possible for defenders of God to ever be technology short?
Right. Right. No, it looks like a deficit of power. And you have to do mental gymnastics after reading a handful of passages like this to say that God is all powerful. I could just spend a whole show on talking about passages that seem to limit God's power. But we won't. I'll do one more of these attributes because time is getting away from me, and I want to talk about some other stuff. All knowing, is God all knowing? Um, it doesn't look like it. I mean, He is when Christians tell you He is, but then when you start reading the Bible, He isn't. One of my favorite stories. I say this a lot about Bible stories. There are so many of them that are my favorite stories. I love the Tower of Babel story. I love it for a lot of reasons, but one of them is this first real time when it looks like God doesn't know what's going on. Now, it doesn't say that per se. So again, those of you who are getting ready to write your dissertations on why David is wrong about this, don't bother. But a plain reading of the story looks like God is in his heavens and he's got agents who are spread out on the earth, and some of them come back and report to God what's going on in Babel, and then God makes a decision about what to do. Now, if God is all knowing, then this is just stagecraft. Why do we have these agents running around trying to get a report on what's happening and giving that report to God? That seems ridiculous. And so, yeah, you can say, well, whatever explanation you want to come up. It's not my job to come up with explanations here. Just a plain reading of that looks like God is not all knowing. Another example is when there's a problem going on earth and he has his council with him and he asks the council, what shall we do about this? And someone stood up and said, why don't we use a lying spirit? And God says, yeah, that's right. We got some of those around. And so they do that. Why does God need a council to give him advice about what to do if he knows everything?
I think that's exactly the right. I think that's exactly the right question. I'd like to ask it another way. I used to ask this 5 or 6 years ago over on the Unbelievable board. What would the last piece of knowledge look like so that you could know you were then all knowing? What would it take to actually confirm in some demonstrable way that any creature, no matter how powerful, no matter how overreaching, no matter how long lasting, what would it take to confirm that they were all knowing? What would it take to confirm any omni attribute of a God? But all knowing works perfectly well in this way.
Yeah, well, okay. I said it. That was the last one. I want to do one more. Um, just a quick Bible reading from a passage that all Christians know, so I'm not going to insult you by giving you the reference.
For God so
Excuse me.
loved the world that.
No, sorry. Got to dig deeper than that. Love is kind and
Oh, come on.
patient,
Please don't read me
never
First Corinthians.
jealous,
Uh,
boastful, proud, or rude. Okay, this is the CEV that I'm reading. A thought for thought, folks. Let me just do that one more time. Love is kind and patient, never jealous, boastful, proud, or rude. All right.
Except don't have any gods before you.
Let me no, no it's I just let me just read one more verse again. I'm not going to bother with the reference. It's your Bible, guys. Look it up. Um, you should not bow down to them or serve them, for I, the Lord your God, am a jealous God, vis- visiting the iniquity of the fathers on the children to the third and the fourth generation of those who hate me. So,
Okay, we pulled out different counter references, but in the end, yes, thou shalt have no other gods before me. Look, I,
he
this
just
this just
comes right out and says he's a jealous God. And this isn't someone saying this is what God. This is God saying, "I'm a jealous God, and I'm gonna fuck you up, and I'm gonna fuck up your kids, 3 and 4 generations down." So this
right,
is
which is a stupid claim because he already fucked everyone up out of the Garden of Eden. So I don't know what this third, just God not know how to count.
I'm a jealous God. I'm gonna get you and your kids. Versus love is kind, patient, never jealous, boastful, proud, or rude.
Maintain
So
the
God
eternal
is.
torture chamber in the basement. Yeah,
I don't know. God is all loving. Um, love is not jealous. I am jealous. Love is not jealous. I am jealous. Love is not jealous. I'm jealous. Okay, look. Am I making some light out of this? Yes, I am. But this is the stuff that's in the Bible, okay? And when you ask an average person to read this is what they see. I'm not making this up. I'm not actually um, trying to take something out of context to make fun of it. This is what I saw when I was a Christian. And you know what I did with this stuff when I was a Christian? I scratched my head. I said, huh. And then I moved on to something else. because because that doesn't look right. Doesn't make sense. So sure, God, omni stuff, but we don't read that when we look at God's attributes. Um, that's not how we read it. That's not how we see it. Andrew, you got 20 more minutes? Uh, cool. 20 minutes. Um, you can set your watch and warrant by it.
uh-huh. So the listeners don't know what that means between you. They're about. Sorry, folks, you're going to find out.
Don't
Okay, 20 minutes.
let them have this. Okay, they need this. It'll be 20 minutes. Um,
Right. By the way, it's only been 5 so far.
no, it's been about 20 minutes. Let me say. So, I know I should have set a timer. So
Yeah, because that would have mattered.
I want to I want to move to the last piece that I have here, but I kind of want to blow my nose first. I don't want to stop, so I'm gonna step over here, and yeah, okay. All right, I'm still trying to
That didn't
figure out how
sound
this
like nose
video thing
blowing, but
works.
there you go.
I should probably mute. Okay. No. All right. Nobody heard that, right? Um, we're we're good. Uh, so one other thing about video, Andrew, I don't have my co-host here to ask this. I'm new to video. I've got a little bit of a crotch itch, so I'm scratching it right now. Can that be seen on camera, or do I need
No,
to?
but
Okay.
the mental,
Are you
just
saying that I shouldn't have said anything?
well, what I'm actually probably saying is I doubt you had any choice. I'm not sure I accept free will in that.
Well, it's hard to know exactly what this camera is seeing and what it's not.
So the moment you said you had an itch, I stopped. I stopped looking.
I'm so
I
sorry.
hope that everyone else was equally tuned in, and
I hope the fact
you know,
that I'm not wearing pants is not showing up. Anyway,
okay. spending 20 minutes doing this.
God's commands. I want to just look at a couple of God's commands in light of the setup that we've done so far. And once again, this is actually me making an honest attempt to explain why we see it in these ways. Because what happens is we get accused of just kind of making up a straw man interpretation to make Christianity look bad. And this is simply not the case. I know that in the case of you and me, Andrew, this is how we read the Bible when we were preaching, right?
Well, and
So,
I do want to offer this challenge. I offered this challenge years and years ago. You may remember over on the Unbelievable boards. If you think that anything I've said is offering a straw man, and David, I know you feel exactly the same way. If you feel I'm offering a straw man, bring out the damned real man and let's have that conversation.
yeah, and by the way, when you bring out the real man, maybe explain to me why your real man is the real man and not some other Christian's view of the real man, because you guys don't agree on this stuff, right?
It's a
Um,
metaphorical real man,
yeah.
backed by mytho-history.
So let's look at a couple of these commands in the light of it. Um, so when it comes to slavery, let me just ask you real quick. You can just give me a real short answer, Andrew.
You think,
Um,
man, that's optimistic.
no, just a short answer.
Okay.
And for the record, I think Andrew, I'm not sure if I did or not. I think you had an option to be on that show and you just didn't want to. But so, um,
I don't care about the slavery conversation. No matter what the outcome of that conversation is or isn't, slavery is reprehensible today, and it wouldn't help me conclude that there was a God.
yeah, I didn't want to do the show, but there was some interest in it, and so I
Yeah.
I did it. But I there was again this kind of accusation that we're purposely skewing scripture. But after that explanation that I have given, and I don't want to spend any more time on this than to read this particular passage that has been read and quoted many times before. But now maybe you can hear it the way we hear it and the way we see it. Uh, if you want slaves, buy them from other nations or from the foreigners who live in your own country and make your property. You can own them and even leave them to your children when you die. From this, I have Christians telling me God is not uh, proposing slavery. He is not proposing that humans can own other humans or that they could be passed down as property to their children when they die. I do not know how to compute that with what I just read.
So I don't either. Um, if it doesn't mean what it says, then then first of all of the translation effort to this point is meaningless because this is the whatever techniques were used to mistranslate this idea cannot possibly be just faulty on this one issue, right? And here's why. Everybody seems to agree. These are the tools that everybody used to get here. And so if this pretty plain, and I'll just say English, here in scare quotes, right? But the reason I sort of use scare quotes around English is that's what we're reading.
Right.
Most of us aren't Hebrew scholars or Greek scholars. We're not even at home in other languages like French, right? And so if we can't trust this pretty simple translation, why should I possibly think that I can trust much more complex theological issues later down the line?
Right. Let's see. You can own them. Okay, so how else might we read this? Um, if we were trying to steelman the Christian argument, what is the other way to read this? If you want slaves, let's stop there. Um, this is not one of the things I've heard is that slavery is just an economic issue like welfare. But this is not merely this is not foreigners coming to you looking to be your slaves because they need your welfare. this starts off if you want slaves. Ignore for the moment the word slaves. This starts with the impetus of the Israelite wanting a slave. What does it mean to want a slave?
Right. So
Can you read this honestly as saying if you need a new employee? Because I think that's how the Christian would want us to read it. I'm just trying to strong. I don't believe that this is what this says, people, but just trying to steel man the argument a little bit. Maybe what they are saying is this passage should be translated if you need another employee. Does that make sense to you?
not in context, but let's say that it does. I mean,
Okay.
so let's go all in. We will continue to try to steel man this all the way through. I have a different problem with slavery in the Old Testament than I think we're going to get to. I'll see if we do, because my problem with it has to do with contracts, and we've spoken a little about that
Sure.
in the past. But let's go ahead and say, for the sake of argument, this is I need a new employee.
Right. Now, I just don't know quite how you get there from the translation. And I don't know how you get there from
Well,
the context either. Um,
I've got. Hey, let me ask this. So I'm not a Hebrew scholar.
yeah, I
But
am. Sure.
okay,
Bring
well,
it. No,
but
I'm not.
here's my question. I think we do have. Um, I think we do have actual employment uh, uh, in the Old Testament
Yeah,
where.
you can find it right before this passage. It where it says for Jews owning Jews. Now, I want you to treat those like employees. It literally says that.
Okay, and
So
I'm presuming
they
that
definitely have a word for employee.
right, and I'm presuming that there's different words.
I don't know. I don't know.
I don't either,
Maybe
but
they're all Eved here. I don't have a Hebrew Bible in front of me, so
I don't either.
I
And
can't
I could go
say.
pull one up, but I don't care
But
because
I would say all of the all the vast majority of translators saw it that way. So they saw when it's talking about Jews that it's employee. Excuse me, and they used the word employee.
right.
Um,
And I think we get actual employment in other stories in the Old Testament where, we have people that are working for a wage. And I would question right away whether those are the same words, because if they're not, you've already got a case to say, no, actually, what we are talking about is slavery.
in some ways, I don't even think it matters if it's the same word because I often, when we're talking, say, "Sorry, I can't talk. I'm working like a slave right now." Um, I do not mean that I am a slave. I don't even mean that I am working like slaves worked. Uh, I am using that to say I am heavily employed right now, and if I don't finish on time, I will no longer be heavily employed. So,
Um, Dave, I hate to do this, but we just had a minor catastrophe, and I'm going to have to leave this here. Um, and you're going to have to finish this one out on your own.
well,
I'm very
I
sorry.
will do that. Hopefully, I'll see you on the board. Those of you who are prayer inclined, please send up your generic prayers. For never mind. Yes.
I think they did. That's why we had a minor catastrophe where the baby made a mess. And
Yeah. Look, take care of it. You can log on in 20 minutes to see if I'm still talking, and just pop back in as if you hadn't left.
yep, fair enough.
So I'm going to
Fair
keep
enough. I
this thing
appreciate
rolling.
you.
All right.
Cheers.
So yeah, there are words. Uh, Hi there.
Yeah, I'm back.
We just finished our discussion on slavery, and we were just getting ready to move to the next piece.
Oh, good.
Yes. That's where my link goes. That's not it. That's not it. That's not it. I don't know where drafts went. Just give me a moment here. This is
So
how the
for
sausage
all
is
of the
made.
parents out there, the minor disaster was a box of cornstarch, liberally scattered in a somewhat even way across the entire dining room floor. Yeah, that's how that was.
Was that all?
Uh,
Cornstarch? I mean, I'm just saying. I'm sure it was
yeah,
very traumatic.
spoken like someone who has never had a 1-year-old cover the dining room in cornstarch.
No,
It's that all.
I've had a 3-year-old do things though, um, and let me tell you, it's no better when they're 3 than when they're 1. So either way, you're gonna have to go to the store and buy another box of cornstarch. Um,
All
so
of the anti-natalists out there, you should a box of cornstarch.
you're coming in and out just a little bit. I think your signal might be somewhat abused, but that's okay. I'm going to keep it going. I think you're still connected. The next one I
I'm
wanted
here.
to the next one I wanted to look at is David's trilemma. I call it David's trilemma. David took a census. You can spend your time reading the Bible stories. You will find that God told David to take a census in one place, and then he told David not to take a census in another place. And so I can see where David may have been confused when he took a census. There's been some debate over whether that's some kind of contradiction, whether there's some kind of translation error. Are these just different times? But it's clear that God didn't have a problem with David taking a census per se. So it was a matter of timing or something is not entirely clear. But some people have said God doesn't want a census taken because that would show that you're not trusting God. You're counting your soldiers and you're counting your people and you're trying to manage your kingdom, but it's not your kingdom, it's God's kingdom, and so don't worry about all that stuff. Anyway, that's not true because at one point God did tell David to take census. But I digress. This was the time when God didn't tell David to take a census, and David took a census. Um, and so I'm just gonna read the passage because David had to be punished for this, and so David's been a bad boy. Gad went to David and told him, "You must choose how the Lord will punish you. Will there be?" By the way, just that alone, it's comical. It brings the image of a parent who brings a child, who has done something bad. Okay, you get to choose your punishment. You can get the stick, or the belt or the paddle. Um, really, that's just sadistic. Um, there's a hint of sadism in doing that. But here's the passage: You must choose how the Lord will punish you. Will there be 3 years when the land won't grow enough food for its people? Now, for what? David David took a census he wasn't supposed to take, and the first option is the land won't grow enough food for the people. What did the
For
people
three
do?
years.
Yeah, for 3 years. 3 years, people are. It's going to be like musical chairs. Some people will have enough, other people won't. There won't be quite enough. Um, so choice number two: or will your enemies constantly defeat you for 3 months? Again, um, th-
By the way, I don't know what that can mean. Just want to point out the sort of nonsensical nature of this one. If you're defeated, I'm not quite sure how you're defeated for 3 months and then you're magically undefeated. You know, at day 91, on day 90, you're defeated. You're done. There's no you anymore. Your nation has been broken up. Your people have been carried off. And on day 91, everything's cool again.
well, I think of it as a war. So you've got lots of battles, and you can lose battle after battle after battle and still be in the war.
I I suppose, and that's probably an okay reading, except I don't know that that's how God thinks of defeat. So humans think of wars, right? We can have battles that we lose and still win the war, but the Christian God doesn't seem to be that kind of God. You're either a winner or you're a loser.
Well,
Um,
he didn't mind letting his people lose from time to time. Yes, as a punishment. So he dangled winning and losing as reward and punishment all the time. So this does seem to fit with his character somewhat. And you also have to take into account this is war is just a thing for these people at this time. So you'll remember the story of Beersheba. That story begins with a line, something to the effect, and when during the season when the kings were off to war, David was at home in his palace. It starts that way because in the implication is David should have been off in war, and he wasn't.
right.
So it was kind of idle hands or the devil's playground kind of thing. He should have been off fighting because this is what they did. They were fighting. God was a warlord. So they were constantly fighting someone. And so the idea is, okay, for 3 months, you're going to get your ass kicked. Um,
Right. So I agree with all of that, except one thing. If God can just decide for 3 months you're going to lose, and then maybe for 3 months you're going to win, and maybe for 3 months it's going to be a stalemate, and all that sort of thing. This is all just a colossal waste of time.
well, yeah, it is God moving pieces on the chessboard. He's playing one man chess, and so I don't want to go too deeply
Okay,
in that
right,
idea.
right.
Not that that's
So
not
we've got
interesting.
3 years of famine. Right, we've got three
Right,
years of famine. We've got 3 months of losing battles.
right, and then the other one, or will the Lord send a horrible disease? I'm sorry, we're in the time of COVID. Or will the Lord send a horrible disease to strike your land for 3 days? Think about it and decide, because I have to give your answer to God who sent me. Okay.
Uh,
um, okay, how am I
yeah,
supposed to read this? Okay, let me tell you how I do read this. I read this as I observe that all three of these punishments are not actually uh, on David at all. David is the one who took the census. Uh,
Right.
and at best, you could speculate that maybe David's advisors told him it was okay to take the census. The Bible doesn't say anything like that, but you could, if you want to speculate, fine. Punish David and his advisors with 3 weeks worth of boils. All of these punishments were aimed at the innocents here. And I know that the Christian will say nobody's innocent, but innocent in the way we normally use the word here means these people were not guilty of the crime that's being punished. That's what I mean by innocent. David is the only named criminal here. But the punishment, all three of these, is to the people of Israel as a whole. And David, whatever happens, is not going to suffer in the way that the other people will suffer. First of all, he's the king. He's going to have plenty to eat. His armies might get their butt kicked, but he's fine. He's not gonna get captured. Disease might strike the land for 3 days, but he's going to be all right. God's going to protect him. He's still a king. None of these things directly affect David. God is punishing David by making his people suffer. This is among the worst kinds of evil that I can think of. It's this indirect, I'm going to hurt people you love as a punishment to you. I don't know any other way to read this. This is how I read it when I was a Christian. It's how I read it when I was 7. Um, I never came across anyone who corrected that reading. So what do you read, Andrew, when you see this?
So, frankly, what I read is mob boss. That's a nice shop you've got here. Be a shame if something happened to it. That's all. That's all I read here, because David wants to count the people. God doesn't want him to, and God sends his second around. Right? God sends some scrub around
Yeah,
to talk to David about it.
God sends
By the
Gad.
way, right. So, in fact, Gad flies. Right, but so here's the question the skeptic is asking, and the one that Christians don't ask. Why should David believe that Gad had any conversation with God?
Right. Well, so let me add to that question. Um, why wasn't David horrified by these options and say, look, the God I know is a God of mercy. He would never punish the innocent to punish the guilty.
Right. Look, that's exactly right. I have no idea. I have no idea what is going on in this story. And let's just say for a moment that God has a good reason for not wanting the Israelites numbered, right? So here's what we don't get. This is what skeptics expect. It's another question that Christians don't ask. What was God's reason, other than I'm a cantankerous old guy in a robe that hangs out in the sky, and I don't want them numbered. And
Yeah,
if you do, I think you don't trust me.
yeah. So
And
sometimes
and so,
I'm okay with the census. Sometimes I'm not okay with the census. The problem is you disrespected me. Uh,
that's
so
exactly right.
I'm
And
gonna
I'm not
get you.
going to give you any. I'm not going to draw a line that you can clearly see that tells you when censuses are okay and when they're not. And more than that, I'm gonna I'm gonna send around. I'm gonna send random people around to. Look, it's a silly story.
So, for those who are unfamiliar with the story, let me just give you the punchline: 70,000 people were killed in 3 days. 3 days, 70, 70, 000, 70,000 people God massacred, it makes the coronavirus look like a cold.
I cannot resist. It's fake news.
Stop it.
I'm sorry.
So, yeah, 70,000 people who didn't do anything wrong. Um, that was David's punishment, and the interesting little stinger at the end of the story was that God, his angel was prepared to do more, but God stayed his hand and said, "That's enough." God took mercy. This is actually an example of God's mercy, that he only killed 70,000 innocent people
In 3 days.
in 3 days. How are we supposed to read this? I don't even know how to steel man a Christian argument here. I mean, I don't know. The only thing that you can do is speculate that these people were really evil. They had some kind of secret sin, and God knew exactly who they were, and he was taking this opportunity to exterminate them. But if that's what he did, he left in his book no clue that that's what was happening. I would love to know what evil 70,000 people did to deserve this death. We're just left with the idea that God is punishing David by killing 70,000 of his subjects.
Right. And what is somewhat baffling to me. So just another skeptic's question. If you're King David, so just cast yourself back to this time. God sends around Gad. You make your 3-day decision. God kills 70,000 presumably loyal subjects. The story doesn't read as if they're disloyal or they're somehow fifth columnists or whatever. These are people who are
They're
working part
just
of your kingdom.
farmers.
Right. So God kills 70,000 of them. And on the fourth day, David says, yeah, well, glad that's over. I love God. Let's move on.
Yeah. Yeah. Who who after surviving this would say, "Yeah, I like Jehovah." I'm thinking there are a lot of people there who would have said, "You know what? Let's give Molech a try." let's
Right.
I mean, you know, okay, that was an interesting experiment. Do we have any prophets of Baal around?
Right. Right.
do we do we have any other options that we? Because this is just bad. Okay, look, let me finish up. Last example. Again, very common. Actually, it's not the last example. It's almost the last example. Okay, no, I got some more stuff. Anyway, it doesn't matter. I'm not going through all this. The 10th plague. I think it's maybe the single most horrible thing in the Bible. Because for those who would say, look, God had his reasons and he would never kill innocent people, the 10th plague really should just put that out of your mind. We're trying to figure out what kind of God this is we're talking about. The 10th plague is where God is punishing Pharaoh. And how does he punish Pharaoh? He punishes Pharaoh by killing his son, not just any son, the firstborn son, because firstborn is the heir. And so God takes away the heir. Now, he can always have more sons, right? And at the end of this story, Pharaoh's not killed. Pharaoh's still okay. He's fine. So he can have more sons. This is a very strange punishment. It not only targets Pharaoh's son, who is not the guilty party here, it targets the firstborn son of every Egyptian in the land. Every Egyptian is not guilty. Okay, Pharaoh is guilty, but we're going to kill the kid of every Egyptian. Is that not bad enough? No, it's not. Because if you were a Hebrew and you didn't get the right blood on the right posts in time, your kid was going to be killed too. Your everyone that in I'm not done. The story's not done. It even took the animals, firstborn of those, firstborn. What did the animals do? I mean, really? What? Honestly, um, so this is an example of God specifically targeting the innocent, the people who are not guilty of the crime being punished. And among those would be children. Um, and so you just look at the last story a moment. And, before you get the words out of your mouth that, God wouldn't target innocent people, uh, you look back here to the 10th plague. That's all he targeted.
The obvious question, I think, for me, is the question that I think we're asking uh, in our current political turmoil. Exactly what could the Christian God do, given the framing of the Old Testament and just a fair reading of the words? What could a God do that would cause lack of support? Could he kill innocents? No, that won't do it. Could he support taking virgin girls as war prizes, and would that cause lack of support? Well, no. Could he ask parents to sacrifice their children to him? Well, no. Could he use snakes to punish his people? Would that? No. What about stoning children or sending bears? What could this God do where these people that I don't understand where the base of support is.
Right. And just tying that to the subject of how we read the Bible, when you read story after story after story like that, you identify that character as a villain. We have ways of reading a story and identifying the hero and the villain, right? The antagonist and the protagonist. And when we look at the stories dealing with God's direct commands or behavior, he looks like the villain. In any other book, we would say, "Oh yeah, that's the villain." So look, just real quick, I will just drop these, and just for the sake of the commenters who don't get to read the blog post, because not everyone can do that. I understand. No one is required to read a blog post. All right. The Abraham test, we've talked about that. So, sex. I'm reading Deuteronomy 31. All right, we've just brought Andrew back on the line. Almost done here. You must put to death every boy and all the women who have ever had sex, but do not kill the young women who have never had sex. You may keep them for yourself. Now, just reading that passage, it's terrible. Let's say, we're at The Hague. There's a war crimes tribunal. There is a general who is on trial, and they are trying to decide whether he is guilty of war crimes or not. And someone presents as a piece of evidence a document containing those words that I just read. Uh, let me just say it one more time. This is what's on the document. I can't believe you let the women live. They are the ones who followed Balaam's advice and invited our people to worship the god of Baal Peor. That's why the Lord punished us by killing so many of our people. You must put to death every boy and all the women who have ever had sex. But do not kill the young women who have never had sex. You can keep those for yourself. If we saw that document, and if you were among the tribunal.
We're just going to move down a little.
Would you go into chambers and say, "Yeah, no, I don't know if that's a war criminal or not"? would you even hesitate? Of course you wouldn't. But somehow, when you read these words in the Bible about the God of the Bible, it's something else. It's a good thing at that point. I am incapable of reading that way. It just feels like a dishonest way to read. And I don't want to call anyone dishonest this week. I did that last week. Um, it was the heat of the moment. I'm not sorry. I mean, I'm sorry, but I'm not sorry. It could happen again. So I'm working on it. 12-step program. Baby steps. This week, I'm not calling anyone dishonest, but I am saying that that feels to me as a 50-year-old who spent much of his free time reading. That seems like a dishonest way to read it. To come away with something that's not awful. So that said, I don't know how to read a thing like this, and feel good about it. I don't, and other atheists read it the same way. Hell, Christians read it the same way until you have a conversation with them and point out the problem, and then the light bulb comes on and they realize they need to start reading it a different way. I don't, we could do this a lot. In fact, in the blog post, I teased that we might do a roundtable on this and focus on the New Testament, because I have just as many New Testament examples, believe it or not. I'm not a big fan of Jesus, and I want to talk about some of the atrocious things that he said he meant it too. So for those who are interested in being on a round table on a show like that, raise your hand in the comments. I'll be in touch. We'll probably put something like that together for this season. That's all I have for now, though. I just wanted to take some of these common passages after we talked for a little while about just the foundation of how we read this book, how we approach it. And then read some of the passages and let you see, kind of show our work, let you see how the wheels turn, if you will. And if the way I read any of these passages feels dishonest to anyone out there, show up in the comments. Let me know that you felt like I was reading it dishonestly, and let me know why. I'm not going to take offense by you saying it sounds like I was reading it dishonestly. I'm really curious about your opinion. Andrew, do you have anything to say before we call it a show?
Not much. I don't. I guess where I start with the Bible is a demonstration of any kind of supernatural agent that could do the things that are claimed. I think this has been a pretty good deconstruction.
Your baby in the background, she's making that noise again. That is so disturbing to me. I can't make the noise. It's this kind of Jetsons car sound. Okay, now she's just punking me.
So we're out at the play park with the ducks. She loves to see the ducks, and
just saying
we're about
unnatural. It's an unnatural noise. I don't know how she does it. I can't get it. I've tried to make this noise. I don't.
Okay, now I'm a little disturbed.
There it is. Everybody, you can hear that, right? Anyway.
Yeah, no, and this is.
Okay, that noise I can make. I make that noise frequently. So you were saying though, sorry.
So no, that's all right. We're putting socks and shoes on. She knows that she's about to. She knows that she's about to be able to run and play, so she is super happy.
She gets to play among the ducks and then eat foie gras tonight.
Say that again.
She gets to play among the ducks and eat foie gras tonight.
Yeah, not on the budget that we have.
Well, yeah, you get it from the ducks. Maybe you play with ducks differently than I do. Uh,
apparently.
yeah.
So I guess for me, we've done some deconstruction here. Some of it's been in jest, some of it hasn't. But what we don't get naturally, as far as I can tell, is any reason to think that there is a God. And Christians will often point to the Bible and say, but see, the Bible gives us good reason to think that there's a God. And so what I really hope out of this is that the people that are listening realize that that story, that somehow the Bible is trustworthy enough to make a claim of the supernatural, to make a claim of an omni-God. I hope that they see the reason that there are honest atheists in the world and that the Bible simply doesn't pass that kind of scrutiny.
Right. That it's a good point that Christians often say that the Bible, gives you reason to believe. But I got to tell you, starting with Genesis, by the time you get to Judges, the Bible gives you reason to believe that it's bullshit. That's what you have. See, the great thing about all of these atrocities that we looked at is we have no reason to believe that it ever happened. Right? We have no reason to believe that any of it ever happened, which is good. Um, we have no reason to believe that much of it even is even possible. So yeah, by the time you get to Joshua and Judges and Ruth, and it just you've the bullshit meter has already pegged off the charts. Um, I suspect a lot of people never actually get past that stuff. But if you read all the books of history, by the time you get to the books of poetry, you have no reason to believe that anything in Proverbs is good advice, because the good advice is supposedly inspired by the monster that inspired all of the books before it. So even if there is something good in the Bible, by the time you get to it, you're so tainted by the other stuff that you've read. There's no reason, when I want good advice, good financial advice, I don't go to the Bible. When I want good medical advice, I don't go to the Bible. When I want good science advice or just advice about the world and how to treat it, I don't go to the Bible. I don't go to the Bible for any of it, because all the stuff that Christians have told me that the Bible is good for, and that these particular places are historical, and this is an example of a good and loving God. I look at that and I say, okay, I'm also not going to come to you for advice on any of these things, because if that's what you get out of reading this, we're not reading the same thing in the same way. And so that's a problem. That's a problem, because I don't want to go through life not trusting just the human advice and interaction of other Christians. My parents are Christians. Some of my closest friends are Christians. I don't want to go through life not being able to listen to them on mundane things. But I got to tell you, I don't even want to take the recipe for chicken soup for a person who looks at the 10th plague and says, "Blessed be the name of the Lord."
So that is exactly right. I don't I don't want to teach myself to do the mental gymnastics required to accept the supernatural claims in the Bible, because on balance, they don't seem to be possible uh, with the normal tools that we use every day. And so I can't trust, as far as I can tell, the conclusions that theologians reach about the supernatural claims in the Bible, and it just makes me suspect, unless I have good reason uh, to conclude that other people that don't use this sort of supernatural, this sort of magical reasoning, uh, unless I can see that they've made a good decision with non-supernatural tools, they simply have not landed high enough on my credibility meter
right.
for me to care what they say.
And this is true in areas of academia too. You know, I'm going to just go out on a limb and say um, Linux, uh, John Lennox, probably a good mathematician. All right, I don't know that. I've never read any of his math work. Wouldn't understand it if I did. But I'm just going to assume that he's a good mathematician. But you know what? I wouldn't go to Linux for math because I see how he reasons. I don't understand math at that level, and I would have to take his word for a lot of things, and I can't trust him, and I think that's a tragedy. I love uh, Craig Keener. I really do. And Andrew, if you ever have a chance to have him on one of your shows, I think you would love talking to him as well. Um, I love Craig Keener. He's bright, intelligent, well spoken, uh, gentle. You know, he's all of the things I love in a person to talk to. But I also see how he reasons with things that I can understand, and it makes me just a little bit not trust his judgment on things that I know he's an expert in. I know he's an expert, but there's that question mark, that asterisk uh, that's there. You know, Hugh Ross. A lot of people love Hugh Ross. Just a little bit of a inside baseball. When I was a Christian, I loved Hugh Ross as well. I've
Yeah,
been following Hugh Ross for a long time. You could call me a bit of a Hugh Ross fan. Um, but when we got lights in the sky and little green men, it probably happened before that, but that was kind of the thing that made me look at Hugh Ross sideways and say, "Oh, he's crazy."
yeah, we can just call it done. Just
I
call it
mean,
done.
like all of his very interesting opinions about the Bible, I just recontextualized them at a certain point and said, "No, I can't buy any of this. Um,
Yeah,
this man is crazy." So
yeah,
this is the thing about how you read the Bible and some of the knock-on effects that it has. So it's not just that we are reading the Bible differently than you, but you even the things that we believe that you are experts in, Christians, or that we think that you can have a perfectly good opinion, there's still that asterisk beside it when you look at God killing the firstborn of everybody, and then you say, "Oh yes, that's a good act." And by the way, let me tell you some other good things. Well, now I don't trust your opinion on what good is. And I know that Christians will say, well, they don't trust my opinion on what good is, and that's fine. That's not the argument that I'm having. Some will say, well, how can you call any of this evil? You're just an atheist. You don't believe in objective morality, so nothing's evil to you. That's untrue, but sure, that's one way that you can sidestep this if you like. But I just wanted to talk to you all for a while and give you some sense of what we're doing when we're reading your book. Okay, you've told us that we need to, that in fact we have to, so we have. And you don't like what we come up with, but this is what we come up with. And I can tell you that the first several times I read through the Bible is as a Christian, and I wanted to believe all good things. And these questions started coming up with me when I was reading it that way,
yeah,
devotionally,
yeah.
right? I mean, this is not me putting a hate on. Um, so with that, I'm going to let it go, folks. Next week, let's hope that Russell will be back, and we will have a very calm and reasonable, just he and I, conversation on politics. Should Christians even be involved in politics? For that matter, should skeptics be involved in it? Um, it's going to be an interesting show. So we'll see you then. Thank you, and have a great rest of the week. See you in the comments.